Welcome back, everybody. Today we are celebrating The Legend of Zelda. This is my #1 media franchise of all time. Put it up there with the best books and the best movies that I've ever seen. The Legend of Zelda series of games. These have been with me for decades. I've been playing them since the Nintendo Entertainment System. I have clearly drawn heavily from the series in the creation of this YouTube channel, The Legend of Zelda, The Legend of Leo. Just swapped out the mascot there for my dog. And finally now, after playing every game that I consider a mainline title, I'm here today, like I said, to celebrate the series with you. So of course there will be some things that you disagree with, whether they are in the rankings or the awards section. But the awards section especially, this is just a chance for everybody to have some fun and talk about their enjoyment with the series and some of their favorite aspects of the series. So we're going to do that section first. And then we're going to get into a little bit of the Zelda timeline before I finally rank the games. Let's begin, shall we? Let's kick off the awards section with a really fun one. The first award is for the Best Hero title. So in the different games, Link has been referred to as many different hero statuses. From Wind Waker, he's the hero of the winds. From Twilight Princess, he's the hero of Twilight. Skyward Sword, hero of the sky. Link's Awakening and A Link to the Past, I like this one especially, the legendary hero. That should be #1, right? It might be a lot of people's #1. Or you grew up with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and your favorite is the Hero of Time. But for me, I think the one that evokes a very particular image of a hero is the Hero of the Wilds from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. When I hear that, it really makes me think of some ferocity, something vicious coming out of the wilderness. A hero who's emerged rather than just been bestowed this Gary Stu status. So I like the Hero of the Wilds. I like them all, really. I'm going with that as the best or my favorite for this first category. Next, we are awarding the Best Equipment and Inventory. So in all of these games, you get so many cool tools, so many cool pieces of equipment that you can use. Hook shots, bows and arrows, different rods and staves with magic or not. And it's really difficult thinking of which one I like the most. Of course, everyone's going to have different answers for this one. You know, every award, people will have different answers for. I'm going to go from bottom to top here, so to speak. There's a lot that I wanted to highlight. A Link Between Worlds was a ton of fun with the different rods. I'm not going to get into all of them just so you can have some fun discovering them for yourselves in case you haven't played that game, but different elements there and many different uses and different control mechanisms with the rods in A Link Between Worlds. Oracle of Seasons. A little bit later in the game, you get an item that I haven't seen anywhere else. I've seen other items inspired by it. Let's just say it has very interesting push and pull properties. Oracle of Ages. The projectile weapon in that one, I don't know why it's taken so long. Well, actually, why it hasn't been done since, but you can fire split projectiles in Oracle of Ages. And the hook shot in that game also has some very unique properties. But I'm going to go with Tears of the Kingdom for the #1 Best Equipment. Look, these games, I know your inventory is shrunk down a little bit to just having a few abilities, but you have so many things available to you, and with Fusion, it basically quadruples, or even more than that. It makes your item usage tenfold. Your item possibilities here. You could take the rubies and fuse them to shields. You could take the bomb flowers and fuse them to arrows. There are so many items in this game, so many things that Link can collect. So, Tears of the Kingdom, I've had the most fun with its equipment and inventory, and that is my winner. The third award is for the Best Instrument. We've had ocarinas, we've had the Wind Waker, the little conductor's baton, the Howling Wolf in Twilight Princess, and so many others. Flutes have appeared in the series in the Oracle games, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch right now. You play a harp in Skyward Sword, but to me, maybe this is cheating a little bit, but hey, my awards, my rules. The ocarina, specifically in Majora's Mask. And again, just for those of you who haven't played Majora's Mask, you get to have a unique instrument using the ocarina for different masked characters. So it's not always that ocarina that you play like this. It might be a set of horns. Could be a percussion instrument. Could be something else. Like I said, could be cheating, but I don't care. My number one instrument is the ocarina, or everything available in Majora's Mask. This next award you might find a little unusual. It is for the best sound effects, and I'm doing this for two reasons. One, I'm not going to be covering the best music because I feel like the music in the series is great overall, but the games themselves, they only have a few tracks that I really love. And so I would really be comparing, if I did best music, 2 songs from this game, 3 songs from that game, etc. I feel like none of the games themselves, from start to finish, they wow me enough. Sound effects, though. Every sound, or every game in the series, has a distinct sound set, we'll call it. Think about Wind Wakers, right? They're really high-pitched. They're a little more digitized in how they sound, and I love those. They're also really jovial and whimsical. The things that you hear, they kind of lift your spirits up a bit. Twilight Princess has very unique sounds as well. Skyward Sword, the same thing. And I guess if you want to include sound design in making your choice here, you might even include Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. My winner is Twilight Princess. And the runner-up is Wind Waker for the reasons that I mentioned. Boy, it's like a tongue twister here. But Twilight Princess wins, and I may as well just play some of the sound effects for you here so you kind of know what I'm talking about. These are sounds that, to me, have been iconic. These are sounds that when I hear them again in Tears of the Kingdom, I go crazy for them. Just makes me think of the Twilight Princess game, and I love that Nintendo has included different sounds in Tears of the Kingdom. Number 5, the best companion, or companions. If you want to include Epona in there, Epona's not in every single game, go ahead. Oracle of Seasons and Ages has some really funny creatures. They're really cute, especially. When I played through the games, my animal companion there was Moosh. I'm going to show what he looks like on screen. Actually, I can't remember if it's a male bear or female bear, but there's Moosh, a really adorable bear. Spirit Tracks. Zelda is your companion, and she's got phenomenal writing. She's got a phenomenal character. I call her writing. A lot of it is actually just in the cutscenes, the expressions, and the way that she behaves with Link. I loved Zelda in that game, but my number one, winning the best companion, is Majora's Mask with Tattle. Tattle is your fairy companion in that game, much like Navi was your fairy companion in Ocarina of Time. That also could have been my winner. I just feel like Tattle has a little more personality. Well, it is minimal. It is something. So there you go. Majora's Mask wins it for this one. But I'm interested in hearing what everyone else has to say for the best companion. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Twilight Princess, and probably not that much Skyward Sword. Now we're starting to get into some of the bigger awards, some of the more serious awards, if you want to call them that. Number 6 is for the best characters. So the supporting cast, the NPCs, who do you encounter around the world? Who do you take quests from? And for me, it's Majora's Mask. One of the reasons why I love Majora's Mask so much is because of Clocktown and the inhabitants there, and how they all have different things going on days 1, 2, and 3. It brings a lot of life to the game, and I think the decision to make that your hub, and also the starting point of the game, does a lot to kind of carry the feeling that it's a very populated world, that you always care about what the people are doing. Tears of the Kingdom populated the world more compared to Breath of the Wild, and I appreciated that. It's got some good NPCs too, and some great characters there as well. I mean, your companions in that game, they should also be mentioned from the last award section. But I'm just going to go with Majora's Mask. I'm remembering their side quests more than any other game, and those side quests in particular, and how you learn more about the townsfolk, that wins it for me. Number 7, the best gimmick. I'm calling it that. It's basically every game's special feature. In A Link Between Worlds, it's how you can go into the wall and you can move along another dimension within the game. In A Link to the Past, it's how you can travel to another world. In Ocarina of Time, it's time travel. Majora's Mask, it's a different type of time travel. And you get it, right? So I'm so curious also. I'm going to be curious about every single award section and the rankings of what everyone's favorites are. To me, my Second, we'll start with, is Majora's Mask. And it's for the same reason why I would actually put Tears of the Kingdom here. And I had to write this down. So Tears of the Kingdom did what I enjoyed from Majora's Mask by making NPCs react differently as you progress through the game. I just talked about that with the different days in Majora's Mask, and you get different flavors of conversation from the NPCs. While Tears of the Kingdom, as you go through the 4 different regions, the NPCs there are going to be reacting differently to you as well. But that's only good for a number 2. My number 1 here, the winner for the best gimmick, is A Link Between Worlds. It's not just the fact that being on the wall moves you along a different plane within the game. There's also another traveling mechanic implemented with that, tied in with that. And I will say, though, it doesn't really matter which game you pick here, because a lot of these games, they actually have interworld or interdimensional travel, if you want to call it that way. A lot of them transform the map from one look into another. Even Oracle of Seasons, you play on your instrument and you can go from summer, winter, fall, and spring. That game's really cool too. If that sort of thing were implemented in a 3D game and you basically had 4 different looking maps out of one base map, that would probably be my favorite. But for now, it's A Link Between Worlds. With 4 more awards to go, we are going to now be talking about the best puzzles and dungeons. And this is something that much of the fan base argues about. Why they like Ocarina of Time more than Breath of the Wild. Why they like Tears of the Kingdom more than Breath of the Wild, etc. A Link Between Worlds, I'm going to be talking about that game quite a bit. I really enjoyed its dungeons and how there was always extra things to go for. These optional goals, whether they were rupees or items or what have you, and those were a higher difficulty compared to the rest of the dungeons puzzles. Also, the dungeons thematically were great. They all involved different methods of moving around and different items to progress, much like a lot of the dungeons in the rest of the series. Second, I have Tears of the Kingdom, because I mentioned puzzles in this award title and the vast number of puzzles that are included in this game, including the Korok puzzles. Yes, I like them, although it could be argued that Breath of the Wild's Korok puzzles specifically were better. I prefer Tears of the Kingdom's shrines. However, my number 1 is Ocarina of Time. And really what's giving Ocarina of Time the edge for this category is how memorable they were. And this isn't necessarily fair. No, it is. I mentioned that this is best puzzles and dungeons. And you know what? Setting up the dungeon is equally important. So in Ocarina of Time, every time you're about to do a new dungeon, there's a really great presentation. There's a great cutscene that goes along with it. And of course, the characters who you're interacting with in and outside of the dungeons, all of that goes into it. The puzzles themselves are fantastic. The themes are great. But it's everything that makes Ocarina of Time's dungeons number 1 for me. Next up, the best bosses. I'm not going to lie, I can't remember every single boss that I've faced in every single game. So I just threw a few games here, and you can agree or disagree. Coming in 4th, I've got Skyward Sword. A lot of these bosses are actually memorable, and I remember this as being one of the games where they started to increase the scale of the bosses. Think about in the 2D games especially, you couldn't really tell whether you were fighting something that was 6 feet tall or something that was 10 feet tall. In Skyward Sword, they made some of these bosses enormous, and I loved that. What I do not love, and why this game is bumped down quite a bit, is the repetition in one particular boss fight. 3rd place here, I've got A Link Between Worlds. Again, I can't necessarily remember the bosses too clearly, even though I played that game not too long ago. I just remember that I liked its bosses more than the other 2D Zelda games. Wind Waker, now there's a couple of bosses that I can remember, especially the final boss. But in that same vein, Ocarina of Time, 2 award categories in a row here where it wins the category. So Ocarina of Time to me has the best bosses for much of the reason why I liked them in the dungeons, or why I liked the dungeons, I should say. They were memorable. They had great presentation, really interesting entrances for how you began the fights. I liked using the different tools on the different bosses. You know, some people don't like Morpha. I thought that was a cool fight. Some people think Volvagia, or however you want to pronounce that one, was a little too easy, but I liked it. It was something different. So Ocarina of Time, the best bosses. Building off of that last award category, we have the best final boss sequence and epilogue. So not just the final boss, but think about everything that goes on in that cutscene and think about everything that goes on before the credits roll. And with that in mind, I want you to share with me what your winner is for this category. Tears of the Kingdom had an amazing final boss sequence, but the epilogue and what happened after the final boss sequence, that disappointed me just a little bit. I talked about that in my third and final review of Tears of the Kingdom. So I didn't realize this, but I'm giving it to Ocarina of Time as well. I didn't know that I had Ocarina of Time winning this many awards. Look, that fight is iconic. I can remember everything about it, even though I haven't played Ocarina of Time too many times. I've maybe only beaten it 4 times, let's say. But everything with the castle and who you're fighting with and who you're fighting against. Oh, it's so good. I'm not going to say more than that. Oh, and you know what? I think a lot of people are also going to say Wind Waker for this one, and I understand that one as well. The scene was so dramatic. Also, Twilight Princess was really dramatic as well. I feel like Skyward Sword let us down a little bit. Anyways, next one. Finally, we are going to wrap up the awards section with award number 11 for Best Presentation. And I'm sorry, everybody, but the winner here is Ocarina of Time. Again, Ocarina of Time had great storytelling. Storytelling, okay? Not story. It's not like any Zelda game is going to wow you or knock your socks off with its story, but the storytelling and how they moved you from region to region and all that kind of thing was great, right? The music in Ocarina of Time, I was listening to that soundtrack again the other day, and I didn't realize how many of the songs I actually loved from that game, but I do love them. The scenes and the cutscenes, they're choreographed excellently. The text, what's spoken in the scenes is great as well. The bosses, the final boss, Zelda, the enemy, all this kind of stuff. It boils down to having the best presentation. And you will probably feel the same way if you haven't played Ocarina of Time yet. The first 5 minutes to open the game and the strings that are in the music and the first dungeon, your little tutorial dungeon, all excellent. So Ocarina of Time wins for best presentation. I didn't include any honorable mentions here, but every game does something very well. I will say some games, they kind of drag on a little bit when you get started with them, and just the pacing in Ocarina of Time was brilliant. So there you go. All right, this section is my timeline. Everybody always debates about the timeline. Did this game come first or was it that game? Did Nintendo mess up its own timeline and chronology by having this detail in this particular game? I don't really care about any of that. What I want to talk to you about in my timeline is the order that I played the games. Everything else can be up for debate and discussion some other time. It really makes no difference to me. This is The Legend of Zelda. Every game could be standalone for all I care. Although, when I was younger, I did try to sequence them as well. At some point, I just realized it was futile, and I didn't need to have them in some sort of order to enjoy the games. So, as I walk through my timeline and I talk about the games in the order that I played them, and we'll see where there are some incongruencies or mismatches with the official release timeline, I'm going to get to share some storytelling about the games and what I remember from the time that I first played them and when they were released. We are starting between 1994 in 1996. The cutoff points here are when I'm old enough to finally remember playing video games at 3 years old and when the Nintendo 64 released. So in this 2 to 3 year gap, I am old enough and able to play Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. This game was released in 1987, so I got to it a little bit late. But I remember really enjoying the game. Now, obviously, Zelda would transform dramatically from this title to look like something completely different, but that never bothered me. That never stuck out to me. I just thought that, hey, this is the NES Zelda. I didn't have the first game. And I enjoyed it for what it was, despite not being able to progress very far. The few songs that I heard were really memorable to me, and I did not beat the game at the time. I'll talk about that later. But like I said, I enjoyed what I played, and the game has some good memories for my brother and I. Now, in 1998, I'm finally old enough to really sink my teeth into these games and finally start beating them. That is when The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released. My brother played it. I played it. Everybody who I knew was playing this game and they were hooked on it. Everybody thought that Link was the coolest character in gaming. And I agree with them. To me, Link was actually idolized. I was the same age as young Link. Actually, no, I wasn't. Why do I think that? Why do I think that I was 10 years old when I played this game? 1998. Link, I was 7 years old and Link, anyways, whatever. Now that I've corrected that little spot in my memory, I was a little bit younger than young Link, but I suppose I looked up to him. And I especially looked up to the version of adult Link present in these games. 17 years old, it's funny calling him an adult, but that's what he is. And to me, being a kid, it didn't matter whether he was 17 or 20 or 30. That was still so many years beyond my grasp. And for the longest time, I thought I might style myself after Link. I might get that blue piercing. Actually, if you wait one moment, I have my stack of games over here. There's Ocarina of Time. But what I want to show you is the big picture here on the strategy guide. And this is what I'm talking about. That piercing that Link has in so many different games. I thought that I was going to get that when I was 17 years old. Clearly, I did not. But there you go, a little bit of personalized trivia for you. And another funny thing that I'll mention about Ocarina of Time is a lot of people thought that Zelda was an RPG. And Nintendo, for Tears of the Kingdom, they do call it an RPG. To me, I feel like so many games are called RPGs and JRPGs when they don't even embrace the role-playing aspect. Like, for example, the Fire Emblem games. Those are JRPGs. At what point are you really role-playing? Some of them, sure, you're the commander. But in other games, you have to pretend to be another character. And there's not that much customization that you can even do for your character. At least in Ocarina of Time, you are playing this game. Maybe the fact that it's so immersive when you play it, you really feel like you are the hero of time. I don't know. This RPG debate, I don't know why I brought it up. Let's just move on to the next game in the timeline. So, in 2000, we had The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. And I have talked about this game many, many times on the channel. I've talked about my story with it. Again, it's a title that my brother played and I watched. And then I had my turn and I tried to copy him and catch up to him. Man, Link was cool in this game again too. Even though he was the kid Link, there is an obtainable item in this game. You basically need to have 100% completion to get it. But if you do that, you can transform yourself into the coolest character in all of gaming. Most of you know exactly who I'm talking about. Just out of respect for anybody who hasn't played this game. I mean, I guess because it's 100% completion required, it's not like it would be like most people playing the game casually would even get it. Anyways, you know who I'm talking about. I thought that was another wicked character. He still is. And of course, the quests. The quests in Majora's Mask are unforgettable. The Bomber's Notebook, the things you do around Clocktown, some of the little cutscenes are just like when you get the title deed or when a Deku Scrub flies in and he blocks you from getting in there. All those little things, I can replay them in my head. The sound effects from Snowhead Mountain, of the wind blowing. Love Majora's Mask. I will talk about it a little more later. Just wanted to share a few of those things with you right now. 2002, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. So by this point, I'm in junior high. We're on the GameCube. It's this indigo-colored cube. Not too many people are as interested in it as I remember them being interested in the Nintendo 64. And I'm playing The Wind Waker alone. My brother's not playing it. I forget what his reason was. Probably that its looks disappointed him. My friends had the exact same reason when they saw the E3 trailer for GameCube Zelda, and it looked more like what what Twilight Princess would be. But then we got this cartoony Wind Waker. That didn't stop me. I loved the last two Zeldas so much, I had to play this one, and I loved the Wind Waker so much that I played it twice over. First, the regular playthrough, I think I did as much as I could towards 100%. Unfortunately, when I was booting up my files here to see what my progress was like, I didn't have a file with 100%. I had a file, New Game Plus, where I had saved over, and I did not have all heart pieces. I don't even know if I've done every quest, but there was something special about playing New Game Plus with changing your costume, and so I felt the need to do that. One little fun story about this is I was finally able to get rid of the feeling of being alone in enjoying Wind Waker. when one day my sister went to her friend's party and she saw one of my classmates, that girl's brother, playing Wind Waker as well. She told me about that when she came back home. She said, "Oh, so-and-so was actually playing the same game." And I went, "What?" I didn't even know he played video games, first of all, but the fact that he was playing Wind Waker was really cool too. So it was nice to finally have somebody else enjoy that game. And since then, obviously, with Twitch streaming and all that, I've seen just how many people love the Wind Waker. Wind Waker HD, I think, sold pretty well as well. But speedrunners and streamers, they love the Wind Waker. I'm sure a lot of people are going to comment about how much they enjoy the game here too. In 2005, I think, I played The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. And this was a little cartridge that I have with no box because my sister, she was working at a video store at the time, and when they were getting rid of inventory before it closed, she brought home a few games for me, and this was one. I think I played it in '05. I don't have the best recollection of it. All I know is that I really like the Picori, or I like the Minish race. They're really cute. Shrinking down a size and seeing their world from their perspective is awesome. And when I replayed it for footage for this video, I did like how ambitious and how dynamic a lot of the movement was on the Game Boy Advance. But it was just fine. I don't know, I quickly moved on from that game. 2006. So now I'm 15 years old, and I played Twilight Princess on its release date. And it was good. You know, it rekindled a lot of interest from my friends and from my brother into playing this game. I saw that he's got a save file in the game as well. I think he beat it too. Myself, I beat the game once, and I do not think I pursued 100% completion. And this was probably the first of the 3D Zeldas in which I did not bother doing so. It was a great game. Sometimes it felt like it was just a good game. I felt like Hyrule Field was a disappointment. I was expecting Hyrule Field especially to be enlarged compared to Ocarina of Time, and it actually felt smaller in many ways. Something maybe about the darkness of the world was a little bit of a turnoff. You're constantly looking for this place that might feel a little more like home, feel more like a hub, so to speak. And there are issues with different towns throughout the game and why those places might not be the place that you call home. Whatever it was, Twilight Princess was just missing a little something for me. And so I beat it the one time. I enjoyed watching some speedruns of it years later, but that's about it. Next up, I think it was 2008 that I finally got my hands on The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. So now I've got to go from a 3D title on console to handheld. And at this point, I'm playing with other means on the Nintendo DS. This game had some great moments, but it really was the low point in the series for me, at least up until that time. There were so many things that were not just frustrating, but were boring about the game. One thing that was frustrating was one particular puzzle where you had to manipulate your DS, the hardware itself. Hey, if you figured that out on your own, congratulations. You think outside the box. That's great. That alone is not why I don't like the game so much. It was boring, it was tedious, and it didn't have much of the thrill and the enjoyment and the fun that the other games did. I think a year later, so before university, I ended up playing The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX. Now, this game was released in 1998, but something about seeing it on YouTube and seeing a Let's Player, H.C. Bailey, that name probably rings a bell for some of you, seeing him play through the game got me inspired to play it as well. And so I did, and I was pretty disappointed too. I thought, really? This is the old style of Zelda? These are the old Zelda games that people love so much? I was conflating it in some ways with A Link to the Past, and thinking that all of the old Zeldas were cherished by the same people or were cherished equally. Of course, later on I would learn that that's not true. Link's Awakening DX was another game that was just meh. It was fine for me. I played it and it was a bit of a slog. In 2011, we had Skyward Sword. Now, by this point, I was mostly moved on from the Wii, and I was done with console gaming. I wanted to focus on PC, but here was a brand new Zelda, and we purchased it, and I did play it. And I actually really enjoyed the motion controls. I had played Twilight Princess with those as well, but Skyward Sword was made for the motion controls, and I appreciated that, and I could enjoy the game a little bit more. It spiced it up, whereas maybe without motion controls, those same sections of the games would be a little boring and mundane. the monsters that you encountered, but I did mention how I like the boss fights. One in particular, I remember rolling a bomb down a slope and trying to strike a boss that way. That was a lot of fun. It's like you were bowling, and who doesn't love bowling on the Wii? Skyward Sword, though, left something to be desired as well. It felt like after beating this game, the series had just continued on this downward trajectory, and I was really waiting and hoping for it to pick itself up again. I had an 8-year hiatus without any Zelda games. Finally, in 2019, 2 years after Breath of the Wild released, I was gifted a Switch by my friends, Breath of the Wild with it, and man, I was hooked. I loved this game so much. Breath of the Wild was everything new that I needed in a Zelda game. If I wanted to replay Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, those games were always there for me. They weren't going anywhere. But Breath of the Wild, with its Koroks, with its 3D movement, with having much better stamina controls compared to Skyward Sword, with the exploration, the climbing, the verticality of the game, everything. I can rave about that game for a long time. Many of you already know that it's one of my favorite Zelda titles and my favorite games, period. And I'll talk about that a little more when I rank it. Just know that that Breath of the Wild saved the series for me after the disappointment that was Skyward Sword. Now, I think it was a year later in 2020 that I finally played the very first Zelda. And a lot of this was inspired, again, by people on YouTube, watching Cinemassacre and hearing Mike Matei talk about how much he loved Zelda 1. And it was his favorite Zelda in the whole series. So I decided, you know what? Enough is enough. I've always thought about playing the old Zelda games, the titles that I'd missed. Let's just knock it out. And I needed the help of a walkthrough, but there was a lot that I actually enjoyed about it. And as I was playing it, of course I kept in mind that this was a game released in 1987. Sorry, that was Zelda 2. This one released in 1986. And it did so many things so well. Of course it's archaic. Of course it's clunky. Of course some of the dungeons or the exploration leave something to be desired. But it was a pretty solid title. Then, in 2023, so just last year, I hadn't gotten from Zelda 1 to any other Zelda titles. I was waiting for Tears of the Kingdom. Many of you know this channel as a Tears of the Kingdom channel, even though it is not. You subscribed with the Tears of the Kingdom influx of videos, and I appreciate that. Look, this is one of my beloved titles in the Zelda series. It did so many things so well. I was hooked on the game, 250 hours booked in it. I'll talk about it more later on, all right? From the time that I put down Tears of the Kingdom, I knew that this video would be coming at some point, and so in 2024, I ended up playing 7 Zelda games, starting with Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Boy, that was not the same game that I remembered from childhood, and I'll talk about that very soon. Then I played A Link to the Past, released in 1991. And I was in awe of how many things originated with A Link to the Past. So many things that I maybe took for granted, or I just assumed that future titles were the originators of. But no, actually a lot of these things, they came from A Link to the Past. And I'm going to be detailing some of those things when I rank the game. Then I played Link's Awakening for the Switch, so I washed the taste of Link's Awakening DX out of my mouth, and I really enjoyed this game. And then I played Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, Spirit Tracks, much better than its predecessor, and A Link Between Worlds. And I've already mentioned A Link Between Worlds in the awards section, so that was a really great Zelda game to finish with, and I'm glad that my adventure through the Mainline series ended on a high note. Now, there's no Four Swords, there's none of those Toon Link games with the different multiplayer capabilities. Even some of these games that I'm going to rank, these 17, I almost consider them spin-offs, but we're going with these 17. I had to have a cutoff somewhere, and so Four Swords Adventure, whatever those titles are called, they are not included. With 2024 being as jam-packed with Zelda as it was, there were a lot of things that I remarked on, some things that I just happened to observe. The Zelda games have a lot of things in common. Some of the series staples, these recurring things, are the rupees, hearts, the enemies like the moblins, the Master Sword, obviously the characters, Link, Zelda, even if she's only mentioned, Zelda's a recurring character too, and so on and so forth. But it's interesting also observing some of the things that appear in high frequency, just not in every single title. The minecarts. I didn't realize how so many of these older games utilize minecarts in their dungeons, because really the only ones that I could remember were in Tears of the Kingdom. And I thought, oh, these are so cool. The Goron minecarts, right? But no, those make appearances in tons of the older games. Gust bellows. You know, an item that I consider really boring in Skyward Sword actually had appearances in previous games, and I'd forgotten that I'd even seen them or a variation on them in the Minish Cap. The hook shot and so many of those other items, those are series staples, just not in every single title. The sages or wise men, Gorons and Zora. How about the Zora? How interesting is it that in some of the past games, the River Zora, they're bad guys, they're enemies, and they're hostile towards you. And then, of course, we got the Ocean or the Sea Zora in one of the Oracle games, and they're good guys, and they're sophisticated and elegant and suave. There's so many more things. I'd love to hear some of the things that you've picked up on this series, what some of your favorite recurring items or objects or whatever it may be, your favorite recurring things in the Zelda series. Obviously, magic has had its up and downs. You've had magic meters, you've had experience where you could level up your magic. Some games don't even have magic, they just have things like the spin attack. How about fast travel? You know, nobody complains about fast travel in Zelda, and I didn't even realize how prevalent fast travel was in Zelda. I guess there are games like Ocarina of Time that just disguise it really well. It's embedded seamlessly in that game because you can't really abuse it. Now in Majora's Mask, it started to, we'll say, dilute it a little bit. They got away from the same thematic fitting of fast travel, where it was just these statues, and if you go to a statue and you play a song, you can skip between any number of them. Ocarina of Time really had the best fast travel system in the series for me. And how about this one? The goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Faror, their colors match the corresponding heroes and villain. So Faror, she's the goddess of courage. And who is the hero or the holder of the Courage Triforce? It's Link. He's green. Red for power and Din. Ganon, the bad guy. And wisdom, blue, goes to Zelda. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And Zelda, you could say, is blue or pink, but you know, she's always had bright, piercing blue eyes. And so anyways, just something I picked up on. If you like those sorts of things, observations, Easter eggs, and whatnot, I may talk about them a little bit in my final review for Tears of the Kingdom, things that I observed playing that game, series callbacks and whatnot. So go ahead and watch that video if you're interested. That puts an end to our timeline section. Sorry, I've already been going on too long with it. Now we're going to get into the real meat of the video, what so many of you are interested in, and we are going to be ranking the mainline games. Now we are ranking 17 different titles. And I've already talked about the games a little bit in the timeline section, and I've already highlighted some of the games with the awards section. I barely have any notes here. Most of the games I don't even have any notes for. I might choose to summarize the games a little bit, and then just give my first and foremost thoughts, whatever comes to mind, about the games themselves. So, in last place, number 17, is Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. You know what? I really wanted to like this game because I grew up with it. I have the physical gold cartridge. I played it as a kid. I know a lot of you older console and retro game fans, you do enjoy Zelda 2. It was just too challenging for me. Plain and simple. I could not beat it without abusing what was it, like an EXP cheat or something here and there. You know what? It was just too tedious. Dying set you back quite a bit. If you happen to be grinding some EXP and then you died in a dungeon, some of the dungeons were just too monotonous, and with how long they were, they became labyrinthian, especially the later the game went on. The towns and finding certain requirements to progress through the game, It may have been in anticipation of doing this video that I just lost my patience with the game, and that's why I had to use cheats on the emulator to do it and save states. Whatever it is, I got to the end, I beat it, I played some of the iconic portions. I will say, on the 3DS, the NES Ultimate Challenge, I love the Zelda 2 section of challenges there. Those are phenomenal. So I like the game in small bites, and I like a lot of isolated things about the game, but just not the game as a whole. Too hard for me, I'll admit it. If you like it, and if it's not that hard for you, or if it's just the right challenge, hey, no problem. What I did like was that a lot of the names of the locations in this game would go on to be used as recurring characters, as very significant characters in the rest of the series. Game number 16, in second last place, is The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. And you probably got a sense of this when I talked about it in my timeline. It really is one of the low points in the series. One of the worst things that you could say about any video game is that it's not memorable. I love The Wind Waker. I do not love Phantom Hourglass. I don't even like that they took the same Link and they made that the next part of his adventure. And whether it is the same Link or it's a descendant, I didn't brush up on Wikipedia before I got to making this video, but I think it's the same Link. I don't like that. After all the highs that were in Wind Waker, it was really disappointing that was the follow-up, but maybe the game just didn't suit being on a 2D console, being on the Nintendo DS. Maybe it didn't suit being shrunk down on the smaller screens. I don't know. We can move on from that game. There's not too much to say about it. Some of it was cool, but a lot of it was just a way worse Wind Waker. Now, in 15th position, we have a controversial ranking. This is basically going to be the Final Fantasy VII of this video. The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. And I know, I can already hear the cries and the groans, and I can even hear some of you swearing at me. Look, I can appreciate a lot of what this game did. For a lot of the reasons why I did not enjoy Zelda 2, I didn't enjoy A Link to the Past. It was cryptic. It was hard to progress through. I didn't have the patience for it. There were times when I would get to one area, and I'd be in front of a dungeon. I knew that was the next dungeon, the next temple, and I was missing a requirement to get in. Well, hadn't I done enough just by finding the dungeon? Why did I have to go and get this medallion? How did I even know where to find the medallion without looking it up? And so there was a lot of stuff that I looked up in a walkthrough because I was going through the game pretty bare bones without getting everything. And it turns out you actually had to go find more items to be able to beat the game. Oh, when I got to the final boss, I didn't have the light arrows. So I died my first time facing the boss, not really knowing what was going on. And rather than replaying it a second time, I just looked it up. I was like, you know what? This whole time, the game has been telling me you're not good enough, you're not worthy. What did it really hurt me or my ego to go and look up how to beat the final boss? Turns out I was missing an item. And I think I was even missing an item to get the item. I didn't have the big bombs. Is that the right game? Anyways, let's talk about what the game did do well, because it's time to start celebrating the games like I talked about at the beginning of the video. So A Link to the Past established a lot of the music and a lot of the main themes that we love in the rest of the series. The Master Sword jingle, if you want to call it that. Zelda's theme, in later games sometimes known as Zelda's Lullaby. The Fairy's Fountain, one of my favorite songs in the whole game, or the whole series. And so many more tracks, I'm sure, that I didn't write down while I was playing the game. Some other things that I did scribble down, though. These are what I believe A Link to the Past, again, was the first one to do, but that are in common with other titles. Link is a descendant of Knights of Hyrule. How cool is that? Link has a more special role in A Link to the Past. Much of the equipment that we see appears in future versions of the games. The mirror shield, the rods, the hammer, and more. How about a fun one? Reflecting projectiles with a non-weapon. In this game, you can use the net. In Ocarina of Time, you can use a bottle. And that same kind of thing probably happens in other titles as well. How about upgrading items with the Great Fairies? All these cool things that you can do in A Link to the Past. I can appreciate them. I just did not have a fun time playing with the game. How about swimming up waterfalls thanks to a Zora item? We get to do that in Breath of the Wild. Like, Swimming up waterfalls. Are you kidding me? First of all, that you can access the water. I mean, I guess you could do that with the raft in Zelda 1, but they took that to a new level with A Link to the Past. Throwing items into a circle of stones to be able to get something else. Koroks, Breath of the Wild, when you see the ring of stones in the water and you have to throw another stone into them to get the Korok to appear, that kind of idea came from A Link to the Past. So it's all of these things and more that makes me appreciate the game, but just not love it. This is going to be really funny because every game that comes up between now and the top games on the rankings, everyone's going to go, are you serious? You actually like that more than A Link to the Past? Yeah, I do. I swear. I'm being honest in my rankings. I am always honest with my opinions, okay? So in 14th position, we have The Legend of Zelda, Spirit Tracks. I mentioned how much I like Zelda as a companion in this game. I will admit, if I did not emulate this game and I did not get to fast forward the train track section, I may have hated it. But being able to do those in fast forward, 2x speed, 4x speed, and not bothering myself with all of the side quests, it made it a pretty fun game. Not great. I can't actually recommend it, which is why it's at the bottom of the list, but I enjoyed enough about it, and I had more fun playing this than A Link to the Past. The dungeons were pretty good. I actually really liked controlling Zelda and her Phantom. I thought that was a great touch and a great mechanic, and we've kind of seen that in some other titles, but this was probably the best instance of controlling a companion. Even better than Tears of the Kingdom, I think. Maybe. In 13th position, we have The Legend of Zelda, game number 1. I did not grow up with this game. I've heard so many good things about it. A lot of people enjoy the game, and I like it. It's not great, it's good. I can respect it, I can appreciate it for its time. I would still rather replay Zelda 1 than replay A Link to the Past. And you know what, that's going to be the last that I say about A Link to the Past. I'm not trying to put the game down. It's a good game. It's just how much I enjoy these different Zeldas. And so Zelda 1, I'm putting it up there. But what more is there to say about the game? You can go and look up people giving reviews of the game. You can go watch some gameplay of the game, and that is exactly it. The game is also cryptic. The game is also very hard. You do need a guide to find out where to go for most of the temples, but the ones that you can find in the adventure without needing a walkthrough, they're pretty good. In 12th position, or you know what, let me do it this way. 11 and 12. First we have Oracle of Ages as the better game in 11, and then we have Oracle of Seasons in the slightly worst game trailing behind it. Really, both of these are pretty surprisingly good games. I played Oracle of Seasons first. I really liked the idea of changing the seasons, and I really enjoyed seeing that any part of the map could have 4 different layouts with different tiles and different things to interact with in spring, summer, winter, and fall, but it wasn't always executed too well. Some of the puzzle solving was a little annoying at times, where just the back and forth between the different seasons or having to go to a different screen to get to another season and then come back. It was just a little bit of needless backtracking at times, but there's a lot of things that I liked. The inventory I mentioned for these Oracle games, fantastic. The animal companions I really liked. And the Hyrule map. I actually really like the Hyrule map and the different towns that you get to visit. In Oracle of Ages, and why this is the better game for me, I preferred using the items, and I preferred especially using them within the dungeons. The dungeons and those puzzles, so much more fun. They were more creative. They were a little more challenging at times, and I could appreciate that so much more. I took less breaks when playing Oracle of Ages, so I played it more just as a straight through, and that was great. That's a sign that you're enjoying a game a little bit more. So Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, these are probably the first games on this list that I really do recommend people play for the gameplay. I do recommend people play A Link to the Past just to see how much is in the game and where so many things started from. But these Oracle games in particular, really fun, underrated gameplay. Now, to begin the top 10 of the Zelda games, we have The Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap. Again, here's my little cartridge. I liked the game. It wasn't incredible. The Picori, the Minish, they're a lot of fun. Being shrunk down in those small-scale environments is something that I've always enjoyed in video games. Just these macro worlds. Think about Super Mario Bros. 3 and the big world, and Tiny Kong from Donkey Kong 64. Something about that kind of world design or level design I've always really enjoyed and appreciated the aesthetic of. So of course you're getting that in spades with this title. The tools and the equipment, they're pretty good. The dungeons themselves, they're really inventive. And the motion and the fluidity of the characters, the animations, very charming. So it's a great game to look at. It's a pretty fun game to play. It's up there for one of the better 2D games, one of the better handheld games, just not my favorite. In number 9, we have the worst of the 3D games, The Legend of Zelda, Skyward Sword. Where is my poor Skyward Sword? Let me get that out for everybody. So here it is. Took me a long time to get excited about playing this. Like I said, I had mostly moved on from console gaming. I wasn't necessarily looking forward to booting the Wii up again, but I did find myself hooked on the game. It was just those instances of fighting the same boss again. Sometimes going up into the sky and then choosing where to go and then coming back down. It felt repetitive. Some of the environments in the worlds, the lands that you actually explored, like the desert, I did not enjoy the desert. There were some interesting mechanics introduced there for how to traverse and how you get around and unlock the different parts of the desert. But I remember at one point wanted to explore it more, and I go to one far end of the desert, and I realized there's really nothing there, at least nothing for me then and there. But I'd gone so far out of my way using the different puzzle mechanics to get there, and I had to backtrack. To just progress through the game, I had to backtrack. Also, the equipment in this game, like gust bellows and mole mitts, they're pretty underwhelming. So, Skyward Sword, yeah, a lot of people like it, and kind of like the Wind Waker treatment, where the more time goes by, the more people appreciate it. I don't know. For me, it's always going to be dead last in the 3D titles. Now for the top 8 games in the series, and this is where I really want to recommend every single game that appears. So, number 8, The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, the Switch 2019 remake. They did a phenomenal job modernizing this game. Much of the game is the same one-to-one with the gameplay and the puzzle solving and all of that, but the little quality of life changes, the fluidity, the the combat and all the controls, they feel great. If you want to hear me talk more in depth about this game, I actually did a standalone review for it, and I'll link that in the description, I'll have it in the comments, or maybe I'll have a card on screen, whatever. You can find it on the channel. Once you feel like you have Hyrule under your thumb, that you can go mostly anywhere, that's when the game really becomes its most fun. So that's somewhere, I would say, around a third of the way through. If you're looking for another Zelda game to play, or if you've passed it over because you didn't think it would be that good, give it a shot. If you have some other reason for not wanting to play it, that's okay. I got more games to talk about. Number 7, The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. This is the most surprising game on the list for me. I did not know how much I would enjoy this game. I had just gotten through the slog of other Zelda titles, and even though I liked the Oracle games, it was still feeling like some work having to play through 2 of them. Finally though, I wrapped up my Zelda adventure with this one on the 3DS, and everything about the game was almost phenomenal. The only thing that's not phenomenal, I'll get to that later, but the storytelling, how quickly it pulls you in, and how quickly the gameplay gets going. From very early on in the game, you have a wide array of different tools and equipment that you can use. Really, the only thing that's stopping you is how rich you are, and it's fairly easy to make money in this game. The traversal and the actual mechanic, I didn't know how much I would like it, but the fact that they built different parts to explore with varying difficulties using this mechanic was fantastic. So like I said, let's say you get into the first dungeon. You have your new wall travel, your new mural ability that you can use. You go on the wall, and you travel side to side within the walls of the dungeon. And if you want to do a little more exploration, if you want to find a treasure chest that you didn't get on your first pass through the dungeon, you can backtrack and you can do a little more difficult puzzle solving. That's where the challenge is. It's optional, but the parts of the dungeon that are not optional, just getting through the dungeon to the final boss, very cleverly designed puzzles. A good variety of puzzle solving mechanics, and good usage of the different heights of the dungeon, different floors, water, different physics that's in the game, the different enemies having different combat stadiums, the different enemies requiring different items to beat, the fact that ice and fire and wind and all the different elements behave differently on the game. You can upgrade things. This game's version of Koroks or Skulltulas, the Mai that you collect, they were a lot of fun and they weren't too difficult. The game is fun from start to finish. It's got great characters. It's got cool places to visit. It's got a fun map to explore. It's got a ton of quality of life enhancements to make the game very fun, very fresh, and very satisfying to play. Nothing about the controls or anything like that are ever going to be annoying or frustrating to you. So, A Link Between Worlds, you've heard so many people recommend it for the 3DS. Don't wait any longer. You owe it to yourself, especially if you're a fan of the series, to play this game. Now, here is number 6, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And you can see I have the Wii version here in my hands. So yes, my first time playing the game was with motion controls. That did not bother me. Using things like the Gale Boomerang, I thought that was actually a lot of fun using the motion controls. Pointing it to a different part of the screen, telling your boomerang to travel here and then there. In fact, the boomerang, a lot of the items and the equipment, I really do like them in this game. Wolf Link was cool. His relationship with Midna, I appreciated that. But what they did to some other parts of the world, in Hyrule and Hyrule Town, the side quests especially, those were lacking. So this is a good game. And because it's a 3D game and I just love the 3D exploration and I love finding heart pieces and I love a lot of the other things that go along with the 3D Zelda titles, it is fairly high in my list. But I don't feel too strongly about Twilight Princess. It's not the cream of the crop. This still has a lot of the familiarities of the other 3D games, but it's just falling a little bit short in comparison. At number 5, the first title in the cream of the crop is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. I have not played the newer HD version on Wii U. I don't need to. This one right here on the GameCube will always look amazing, will always play amazing, feel great. I believe it's in 60 FPS. At least that's what it feels like when you're rolling around. And man, it's so smooth. Being able to go back to a game on the GameCube and having the game feel the way that it does and control the way that it does. Of course, the Wind Waker is more than just its control. The combat is a lot of fun. They started adding a lot of dynamic combos to the swordplay here. The side quests in this game are pretty good. Not the best in the series, but there are some great side quests in this game. The exploration, the adventuring, the music that comes along with the adventuring on the Great Sea, the music that you hear on the different islands and in the dungeons themselves, the boss fights, they're big, they're grand, they're cool, how they make use of the equipment. Traversal is a lot of fun, not just by sea, but also by land. I love the inventory. I love the power-ups that you get, and so much more about the Wind Waker. This, for me, is a really interesting one, because I was a young teen when I played it. So I was getting a little bit older, but I still loved Zelda. I love it for a lot of childish reasons, including from the game itself and its presentation, and a lot of me. It's still a childhood favorite of mine, and yet it's still good enough that a teenager can play it, and it's still good enough that an adult can play it. So Wind Waker, I know I'm not saying too much that's really specific about the game itself, kind of talking a little bit about some of my feelings and some sentimentality with the title, but it's just been a long-time favorite of mine, and I love a lot of the uniqueness of this title. So The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker, number 5 on the list, and let's move on from there. Now, at number 4, we have The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, the game that I awarded so much in the awards section. You were probably thinking that this would be number one for me. It's right up there. For the longest time, this was my favorite game in the series, or at least tied as my favorite game in the series. I've enjoyed playing it on the Nintendo 64. I've enjoyed experiencing the game, not just through playing it, but by watching speedrunners play it. I liked playing the Master Quest version, the upgraded and enhanced and more difficult version of the game. Ocarina of Time is a classic, and whenever I boot it back up and whenever I play it, even just to capture some footage here, or when I finally try the 3DS version of the game, I'm reminded by how good it is and how perfect Nintendo's choices were, how deliberate they were in making the Deku Tree the first tutorial dungeon, in making it so that you start out nice and small, you start out at home, and then you have to go out into the world on your own. The storytelling, all the things that I honored in the awards section, I don't have to rehash them right now, but all of those little details and all of those elements, they are done excellently. The equipment that you get in this game, bomb chews, different arrows, how you find the arrows, how you meet different characters, going to Zoro's domain. Really, I could just enjoy talking about so many of my favorite parts of the game. What do you need to know if you've never played it? Great gameplay, great combat, great equipment, great bonus things to go find, the gold Skulltulas, great side quests for getting your bottles, and the Magic Bean side quests. I go on and on and on and on. And if you play The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I bet you this game's going to have some of your favorite characters as well. So there you go. I'll cut it there, and we'll move on to the next game. Now I have to move on to something a little more modern. Here is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the game that really brought me back into Zelda. And even though I knew that Zelda was my favorite series before playing this game, this just cemented it. This gave me hope. This really fulfilled a lot of my wishes. It took so many years, but Nintendo, after some disappointments with Twilight Princess, with Skyward Sword, and don't forget I had skipped a lot of the handheld games, finally coming back to this made the wait worth it. The exploration, the adventuring, the creativity, the ingenuity, being able to use stasis and all of these different puzzle-solving mechanics. Koroks for having hundreds of miniature puzzles all over the world. The different people you could meet. Now, granted, there weren't necessarily enough NPCs in this game, and sometimes the world did feel a little too barren, but that is a small complaint on what is virtually a 10 out of 10 game. I think, since there are still some games ahead of this, I'll say it's like a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10 game. But really, what a phenomenal place to begin. If this was your first Zelda game in the series, if you're a little bit younger than me, that's got to be something pretty incredible that you had so much available to you in one single game. The number of hours that I put in there, I think I'm at 280, because at one point I even went back to the game and I started looking for more Koroks, and I got to around 450. And I replayed the game on Master Mode with the DLC, and I made it a mission to do every boss fight without taking damage. So I had a lot of fun with Breath of the Wild. My friends were playing it as well. It was more of a social experience. Again, that's something that I had been missing with the previous Zelda titles. Finally, it felt like everyone was connected with Breath of the Wild. And that is something that does elevate it in this list a little bit. Okay, in the number 2 position, but for so long, really my number 1, my favorite Zelda game of all time, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. I love this game. I love so many things about it. I never had any complaints about the time mechanics in this game. I had this bad boy as my companion. So I had Tattle in the game and had the guidebook by my side. Also, like I said, my brother playing the game before me. I could always take a look and see what he was doing in his file. Man, I've talked about this game before in my top 50 games of all time. If you want to go and look at the last section in that video, my games number 5 to 1, I talk about it there. I could mention every single thing about this game. The music, the dungeons, the exploration, the world, everything that I said in the awards section, everything that I said in the timeline portion of this video. How about little characters like the Toilet Hand? Oh, he's a recurring character in the Zelda series too. It's really funny seeing him in one of the Oracle games. The masks I thought were such a great idea because you have your massive equipment already, much of it preserved from Ocarina of Time, but then they give you more that you can play with a full screen of masks. There's 20-something in the game, I'm pretty sure. Not only that, but one of the things that I neglected to mention in the award for best characters, the characters that Link can transform into, they are so awesome. They are so cool. And much like how I idolized adult Link from Ocarina of Time, the characters that Link can transform into here, their designs, their backstories, Mikau especially, I've talked about him before, I was just all about them. I wanted to wear the same kind of hat. I wanted to play the same instruments as them. I wanted to learn the songs when I finally did play my own instrument, the saxophone, on the saxophone. So, Majora's Mask, one of my favorite games of all time. A game that I've talked about before on the channel, so I will leave it at that. But if any of you talk about Majora's Mask in the comments section, I'm really going to be looking forward to reading those comments in particular. Okay, here we are with number one, the best, my favorite for the rest of all time. No, we don't know that for sure. But the number one Zelda on my list is Tears of the Kingdom. Who saw that coming? You know what? Tears of the Kingdom, I did so many reviews for it. I did so many little strategy guides and combat videos. It's clear how much I loved the game. Again, it was another social experience, which I think really matters as you get a little bit older. There's got to be something that about a new game that takes you back, that really reminds you of what you enjoyed about gaming or what you enjoyed about a series when you used to play your favorites in that particular series. So not only did this have the inclusion of so many familiar enemies, familiar faces, names and titles and what have you, but my friends were talking about the game just like we did with Ocarina of Time. Now, granted, it was a different group of friends, but we still talked about the game and shared secrets about the game like we did for those old Zeldas. When I made the YouTube videos, I told everybody I was not watching anyone else's content. I was playing the game, I was writing down my own ideas and my own tips, and I was posting those online. And so when you commented on my videos and you had a new tip for me, it was just like the old days, playing the games with my brother, playing the games with friends in elementary school, a little bit of playing the game Twilight Princess in junior high or high school. Tears of the Kingdom, the best game in the series for many reasons, not without its faults. It didn't sweep the awards section, so there are so many other games in the series that do other things well and better, but this is my new baby. Majora's Mask is right up there too, but recency bias, I will give it to Tears of the Kingdom. So that is it for the rankings, and now we can move on to my final thoughts. Maybe the rankings were a little bit underwhelming in some aspects, but I hope you enjoyed having fun with the awards. And I hope you enjoyed having fun a little bit, if that timeline section was at all worth watching. A few things that I want to close off with here. Overall, Zelda is just a fantastic series, and I hope that Nintendo continues to do well by Zelda fans. Tears of the Kingdom started to verge on a few things that were typical of modern games that I was a little iffy about, but overall the experience was incredible. So Nintendo gets a pass. But there are a few things in Tears of the Kingdom that have me a little hesitant, a little apprehensive about the future. For now, as opposed to looking towards the future, I am looking forward to the past. And I'm actually looking forward to playing a lot of the spin-offs and a lot of the other games that have come out that I haven't played yet. Cadence of Hyrule, I really like Crypt of the Necrodancer, so I should like that title. Age of Calamity. You know, I really enjoyed Hyrule Warriors. I want to mention Hyrule Warriors also for any fan of the Zelda series, especially the older titles. This has so many familiar faces. This is a great honor, a great service to the rest of the series. Love letter, homage, whatever word you want to throw at it. It takes so many characters and so many pieces of the equipment, and it includes them in this different genre, this hack and slash, in a way that feels so familiar to you. and nostalgic, right? It's satisfying. Playing these different characters and seeing them explored in different ways with different combat styles. It's a huge game for fan service, and so I recommend this for any fan of the Zelda series. Even if you don't think you like hack and slash or action, you have to give this one a shot. Another thing that's fun about the Zelda series, as I reflect on all the games that I've played now, is seeing how many things were actually reused in the entirety of the series. How many things were introduced in A Link to the Past, and how many times were they recurring throughout the rest of the series? And how many things in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are truly original? We have a couple of the abilities, but if I stop and think, did we ever get stasis in another game? Did we ever get something like Ultra Hand in another game? No, we didn't, but my point is, after I make this video and after I publish it, I'll probably spend a little more time thinking about the series as a whole. And if you have anything in the comments that you want to throw in, like I didn't mention one particular favorite recurring motif, whether it's an item or music or what have you, please mention it, please share it. Like I said, we're just having fun talking about the series as fans. And with that said, I would also like to hear other people's favorites. So don't forget, if you have the time, please write your own little awards section. It doesn't have to be all of the awards. It doesn't even have to be the awards that I mentioned. You might have some other things on your mind. If you want to include your own rankings, I'm so curious to see what people's number ones are, where some of my less favorite games are in your lists. I would love to hear also, maybe who's the best Ganon? Who's the best Zelda? Who's got the best outfits, right? A lot of the conversations that we used to have in the schoolyard or at recess. Also, on the note of where the series can go in the future, maybe you want to talk about your predictions. Maybe you want to talk about what you hope to see in future Zelda games. Maybe there's a game in this list, and I hope I've done a good job not spoiling anything, that you want to play next. And please let me know what game that might be. What I would like to recommend to you is, if you like the look of Wind Waker or Minish Cap, play them for the look. If you like the sound of A Link Between Worlds being this really complete game that ties in the best of the 2D with the best of the 3D, go for A Link Between Worlds. You know, I thought when I played it, it had much of the exploration of Breath of the Wild, where you could go anywhere, wherever you wanted. You could do the dungeons in any order, I think. And it still felt like you were on the same map as A Link to the Past. So if you are a fan of A Link to the Past and you haven't played A Link Between Worlds, go and play that title next. You have so many good options with the Zelda series. Really, you can't go wrong, maybe unless you play Phantom Hourglass. But aside from that, if you're a retro head, go play something retro. Or even if you do like the handheld games and you want more of Toon Link, I don't care, go play the DS titles. Zelda is so diverse, has so much variety. There's a Zelda game for everybody. What I really hope to see is that maybe half of the titles are mentioned as people's number ones. We'll find out. All right, and that's a wrap on another ranking video. Thank you everybody for watching. I try not to make this one as long as the Pokemon rankings, although I may have dragged on a little bit too long during the timelines. Regardless, I appreciate everybody for watching. I'm going to appreciate even more anybody who takes to the comments section. Share your rankings, share your awards, share your stories. One of the reasons why I dragged on is it's just fun sharing stories about my favorite series, right? So goodbye from the Legend of Leo, this little guy over here. Hopefully everybody can go out there and replay or play a new Zelda game and enjoy adventuring in the lands of Hyrule. Thanks again. Bye-bye.